Hey everybody, today we are changing the brakes on the Mazda Demio and it's completely shit, basically. Even the brake pad that's supposed to be unmounted from the whole section is rusted shut, as you can see here. I really have to go violence on this thing to get it off. Really stuck on there. Oh, anywho, taking in both my hands if I'm gonna make this work. And this is the whole caliper part, which you need to remove the pins in order to make them separate from the cylinder if it's rusted shut. Took a good hour or so hammering around like crazy with a hammer, that is. And the rust is substantial, as you can see here. It's really rusted shut everywhere. And it was finally time to change the brake pads, as you can see here, because it's completely shot. I overshot this completely this time as well. Whew. So onward with installing the EBCs on this car. So I'm continuing my renovation of the brakes on the Mazda Demio, and some pointers to somebody that wants to do this by themselves as well is that the shield is usually pretty rusted up, and sometimes you need to actually cut some pieces out just to make it look, fairly standard again. So this part here, for instance, it was just bending the part basically until it fell off because it was so rusty at the tip. This part here is how it's supposed to look because it's still in one piece. So basically it's further up to the actual bracket here, somewhere in between. But that doesn't matter, so instead of ripping the whole shield out and getting a new one or going without, this is the best and most common way you can do to just preserve what's left. And from a normal perspective, this looks pretty good. Also, be careful when painting with hammer finish because it's a really strong paint, which in turn makes it really hard to remove as well because you have to grind it off. So be careful not to paint those areas, all those brackets that you're supposed to reapply other brackets and then later on brake pads and discs. This to avoid that it doesn't fit during reinstallment of the whole thing, and also because if you need to remove it again, the paint will make it more difficult to disassemble everything. At the same thing here, when you check out the whole caliper, now I painted the whole thing. It's the whole frame. It's in one piece actually, so it's pretty much more easier on a Mazda Demio in comparison to a Subaru, for instance, because you have to split the caliper into two parts. You don't need that in this one. So just paint it. And as I said before, not the internal structure. Just keep that sanded down with some sandpaper or with another tool, just to make it as clean as possible. It's fairly clean, as you can see. I've been scraping off a bit on this parts here. So it's ready for installation. Now it just needs to dry up because I was finished with the painting right now. Other than that, after reinstallment, you can just put some extra dots on the parts you may have missed with the hammer finish because it's so easy to work with. And at the end of the whole installation, I will be spraying with rust protection all over this place, as you can see where all the rusty parts are actually building up. It's not heavy rust. It looks pretty damn bad, but it's not that bad because it's the upper layer of the metal that has had a fine layer of rust, and it's just something you scrape off as much as possible and then you try to protect the rest of it. So this would probably be the worst part of this whole thing, I think, because it looks warped a little bit as well, but it's still stuck on there and it turns, so maybe just keeping it alive as much as possible and see how far it can take the car. But other than that, I really don't have any other problems for now so that don't pass inspection. But I'll continue working like this, and it's probably gonna look pretty awesome with the EBC brakes on when that's finished. So we are actually finally doing this. This scrap over here is what we used to call brakes that we uninstalled from the Demio. And I've been thinking ahead. You saw my unboxing video maybe from JSPEC, one of my more newly sponsored companies here. And we're gonna check out the parts. Always check out the parts before installing. So it looks as a perfect fit. Also the girth looks the same. We check it from this angle. Yep. So these black coated rotors are actually one of the best products you can get from EBC brakes. I've said this before in my previous video from the Subaru brake change. And I can just remind you guys that this coating is here to protect the rotors from deterioration at the test of time, because this part rusts heavily and it gets abused all the time because it's a brake. And when that fine layer of the first coating here, this will be grinded down by the brake pads, will be the only actually shiny, more grinded part on the entire rotor. So with this said, the brake pads always come with the brake-in layer. This is brake-in, which is the first embedded layer of the brake pad that will make this rotor fit in order to brake at optimal performance. So we have also the need to check if the brake pads are compatible. It's going to be hard to find a brake pad that isn't in parts, because I overshot this time again with my brakes. I'm so freaking ashamed, because I never do this usually, but I'm getting pretty good at it, as it seems. These are from the, let's see here, on the left side, which was, I think it was, no, maybe it was the right side, probably the left side, this side, which didn't break that often as it should, because it was pretty stuck. But as you can see, there's still pad on there, and it isn't falling off. And I can't say the same about the other parts, which are completely grinded down. It's probably on the right side of the car, because that was the only brake actually working and doing its job. So we need to compare both parts. And as you can see, we probably found the left part side. I've covered this before. There's a bracket at the side here, which doesn't really make sense because it's just on the left side and not the right side. But enough about that. I've told about this before, but as you can see, we found the compatible part. Let's see. Yeah, it's going to be on this side, actually. So we can see if the, no, wrong again. It's actually this side. Yeah, so again, checking girth and checking volume. And as you can see here, these were not green stuff, by the way. These were some blue label standard parts you can get in any store basically. And it looks like the metal pins are going straight forward as it's supposed to do. Yeah, so the parts are compatible. And why am I checking this? Because sometimes you can do it wrong with your ordering and it can be off by one model or measurement, or even if it's another version of a Demio like this, because there are several, but they are fairly easy to maintain these cars because the parts are everywhere. So with that research, I can clearly say that we are good to go and we can install all these things from JSPEC. And thanks again JSPEC for ordering everything for me, because these parts had to be ordered not overseas, it's from UK apparently, I think. And was not in their stock, but that didn't have any problem for them to actually order everything for me in the same package when I got this huge deal I made a video about. So going forward and installing the brakes. One of those parts from the brakes on the Demio is one of, or two sets of metallic rods that just goes straight through the brake in these small holes here, over there, which holds the brake pads together. And it needs to be better than this, because as you can see there's a lot of corrosion with rust and it's almost warping as well, and they need to be able to stretch back and forth and slide. So we have to do something with some sandpaper. So sand these down as much as possible to get all the rust off, and at the end they should be able to slide right back in there again. Because my problem with disassembling these brakes were that on top of the hat of this rod were stuck in the hole. And it's not because of the paint, because it was just too rusted up and warped by time. So be careful to check these before reinstalling everything, so you don't get the same problem back again, because these were the bad guys that made my pads not going back and forth, and not the cylinders, which is usually the case.